and welcome back to the Pop Culture Lens, right here on the Pop Culture Lens YouTube channel. We are still in Prague. We are still on our pop culture pilgrimage. We've just climbed a really tall hill. You can see behind me the city kind of sprawling out in all directions. But we climbed a really big hill because we were going to look at a castle that was featured in films like The Brothers Bloom. We're also going to find some locations from Amadeus, from Blade 2, the Guillermo del Toro film, and just give you a little bit of information about them as we make our way to these sort of holy sites for film nerds. Anyway, come on, let's go take a look.
The view from the castle. Chris, why do they like stairs?
Huh?
Why do they like stairs so much here?
Because that's how the city was laid out. Protect themselves from invasion. Alright, so the next stop on our pop culture pilgrimage is very near and dear to my heart. This house that you see behind me was the exterior that was used in the film Amadeus. This was Mozart's residence in the film, or at least this was the exterior to Mozart's residence in the film. And like I said, this is very near and dear to my heart because Amadeus is absolutely one of my favorite films of all time. So this, to me, is really cool. It's really funny because just over there, just beyond the camera, is the palace and the National Gallery. All of the tourists are over there. Nobody's over here, but we decided to come here just because this is such an important film to me and such an important site for me. So we wanted to share this with people on our YouTube channel. So the next stop on our pilgrimage is St. Giles Church. This is the church that was featured in the film Amadeus. This is where Mozart married Costanza in the film. So check it out. So the next stop on our pop culture pilgrimage is also from Amadeus. What you see behind me here, this gorgeous building, is the Estates Theater. The Estates Theater was opened in 1783, and it's the only theater left standing where Mozart actually performed. This was where Mozart's opera Don Giovanni premiered. And in the movie Amadeus, they filmed the sequences showing Mozart conducting Don Giovanni at this theater. So there's a connection here between the film and the reality. Don Giovanni premiered on October 29th, 1787, and that's what you see in the film. You see a recreation of that premiere. So there's that.
So for this episode conclusion, we're kind of getting back to what we talked about at the conclusion of the last episode with Hellboy, and the idea of how you have this duality in going to visit places. But with Amadeus, it's kind of a little bit even more interesting too, because Amadeus is, if you don't know the story of Mozart, you might think it's real. You might think that what Salieri is saying and the way that they're portraying Mozart, is a realistic portrayal. But it's not, right?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, from what I understand, and I'm, vaguely familiar with the actual history, but Salieri and Mozart were actually pretty good friends.
Yeah.
And the film portrays them as more kind of rivals, in a way. I think there's a tendency, especially among American audiences, to look at films that purport to be based on a true story and take it kind of as fact, not understand that often these films are they're tweaked a bit. The history is tweaked for narrative purposes, for entertainment purposes, and don't really reflect the reality. And it's kind of like what I said, when we're talking about Hellboy. It's like you go to these sites and you're seeing sort of this blending of reality and fiction. And I mean, that's what films do. Films that are based on a true story tend to sort of blend reality and fiction to make them palatable. Palatable for audiences.
But it's interesting then that when we went to, say, the Estates Theater, and the idea that was the first place where Don Giovanni was performed, and then that it was the same as it was in the movie. It's just it's that interesting, almost like a playing with history, in a sense.
It's a narrative. We're narrativizing history.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. You look at any sort of general interest book that is like a historical account. They narrativize it to make it something that an audience can consume. And that's what films are doing. Films just do it to a whole different degree. I mean, I remember a few years back I had an interesting interaction on Facebook talking about the movie The Social Network.
Oh yeah.
And how much I loved it and how I thought it should have won some awards and whatnot. And a lot of people were pointing out that because I think that was the year that the King's Speech won, which is, the King's Speech is a good movie, but The Social Network is a great movie.
Yeah.
And so many people that I talked to said that it shouldn't have won, that Social Network should not have won because it played fast and loose with the facts.
Yeah.
And that the King's Speech was more factual, and it's no. I mean, the King's Speech is no more factual than the Social Network.
Yeah.
In terms of just how the story is presented. And my thought was, it's like, Amadeus swept the Oscars when it came out.
Yeah.
And it was very popular and it was very well received. And it plays very fast and loose with history.
Yeah.
And if you're looking to film for your historical knowledge, for your historical accounts, you're going to be disappointed because they're not factual. It's presenting a version of history, not the history itself.
And yet we learned something today on our pilgrimage because of learning about the Estates Theater and things like that, and its relationship with Mozart.
Yeah.
So there's.
So if you're willing to look past the movie, if you're willing to look past the Hollywoodized, narrativized version of history, you can learn about history. But even then, the things that we know now, we don't know what it was really like. We don't know what was really going on. We only have this perception of it.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
So hopefully that gives you some insight into the way we think about these things.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for joining us on this pop culture pilgrimage. We hope you will join us again when we go on another one.
Yes.
And we hope you have a great day wherever you are.